A reading from Whispers from Eternity. Number 87, Worship of God as Sacred Joy. O Father, from joy I came, for joy I live, in joy will I melt again. Thou art sacred, perennial joy. Thou art the joy I seek. Thou art the everlasting joy of the soul. Teach me to worship Thee through the joy born of meditation. Balance my worship with good action, and teach me to shun all false pleasures which, siren-like, call to me through my misguided senses. Great to be with you all in person and online. My name, for those of you who don't know, is Viveka Devi. My husband James and I live here in the Palo Alto, Ananda Palo Alto community. We live and serve here. And it is our great joy to live here and serve here. This is such a beautiful topic, and I'm also going to say a challenging one. The balance of seva and inner communion. This idea of how to know. That was one of the first things that came to my mind as I was reflecting on the reading, in part from my own journey, and then also with friends and students talking about this. And it's a theme that comes up. It's a very important part of the spiritual life, and many traditions recognize this and emphasize it. And certainly in Ananda, it's absolutely a theme of seva. Seva dissolves the ego. So it's one of the best ways to become free in our consciousness. We're focusing on other people or other things. And the idea, as it says in the reading, is to make the connection between that and serving God. So service alone is transforming. It has a quality of when you're present to someone else, you forget yourself. And quite often that's a great freedom to be not thinking about yourself and what's going on for you. And then to take it to the next level when we're practicing, as what Yogananda said, God serving God. This idea that everything I do for another person or any project I'm involved in, whatever my life is, how can I hold it as a practice of giving it to God? This is for you, God. This is for you. And inviting God's grace to come in and do the work or the service through me. And so that too, it's practice, right? I was thinking this morning, practice makes perfect. Because sometimes it just doesn't feel very perfect. And what I've seen is there can be a gift in that too. Right? A good friend was sharing this the other day, just so beautifully acknowledging a stumble that she had. And she's like, I stumbled, right? That I acted in a way I didn't want to act. It's not how I hold herself to be, right? Living by the teachings, practicing the yamas and niyamas. And so she was just sharing with me that ultimately she needed to accept herself about it, acknowledge it. It was important for her to acknowledge it, but not to become burdened by it. And she then was telling me just a beautiful story of an encounter she had with another friend on the path who had stumbled with regard to her and said something that was upsetting, it was offensive, and she challenged this friend, and it was in a group setting, and said, what were you thinking? Like, how could you say something like that to me? And she said suddenly her friend paused, got very quiet, and in front of everyone said, well, clearly I wasn't. And she said it so sweetly and just without defense that everything dissolved. Right? The tension that was there. She said, well, how could I be angry after that? Her friend just said, yeah, I stumbled there. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't being conscious. So this practice of another part of it is, well, what is inner communion? What is that? Right? So the Yogananda talks about the 8 aspects of the divine. And in our meditation practice, Hong Sa is a technique that he brought to us and refined for us, and we teach here at Ananda and practice, and then ultimately a path to Kriya for those who feel called to that. There's a whole path for that. Hong Sa cultivates the quality of divine peace. And it's not the only quality you might feel when you're meditating, right? You could feel light, you could experience light or joy, calmness, any of the 8 manifestations. And these can also happen in service, right? Just recently we had 2 Rajasi days. So one at the community yesterday and the one the week before here at the Sangha. And the joy level is just palpable. It's wonderful. And you have a moment where you get completely lost in that service. And I will say, yesterday I was preparing for a Sunday service. It was not an easy decision what to do. There were a lot of things that had happened preceding it, and my intuition felt like it would be better for intercommunion for me. Intercommunion just takes some time to be quiet and be inward with this, but I could feel the joy. And at a certain point, I went out and connected with Asha briefly, and it was lovely. It's a blessing, I guess is what I want to say, is that when we are practicing our spiritual life, it is a blessing to other people to be around that energy, to be around that intention. So another aspect I was reflecting on in how do you know and how do you do it, one of my first service projects here at Ananda was through the Sevaka program, which is a beautiful program. And it's a way to go deeper in your connection with Ananda. Once you've had Kriya and you build a certain community, and Seva is the heart of it, right? But again, it's a balance. You're studying the teachings, you're being inspired, uplifted, and then you're practicing, putting them into action. So we were working on Sri Yukteswar's gazebo, a little temple out on the green. And at a certain point, and it was a long project, so it was many times that we were doing it. At a certain point, I always remember this, Chidambar was walking around, right? He just kind of, and he just periodically would say, "How's the joy? How's the joy?" Right? And like you're just in the middle of whatever you're doing. And there was some physical labor involved, right? So he just had this perfect timing, right? Just to like pause and go, right, how's the joy? Right? Just this reminder of why are we doing what we're doing? What's the point of it? Well, we're serving God and we're doing that together. And let's not lose the joy. Prior to Ananda, I had a lot of experience with through the Catholic Church service and ministry. So when yoga came into my life and I heard the teachings, I could relate it right away. Oh, that's ministry. That's how I had been trained in that. And I had the experience of being a lay missionary and then years later directing a lay missionary program, so training lay missionaries. And this balancing act of service and how to stay connected to a higher vibration. I didn't have those words then, but that was the teaching and that was the practice that we would do together of how to identify, really to be a channel, which is what we talk about at Ananda, how to be a channel of grace. So part of it is not to over-identify with what you're doing. And I will say, from that experience of a lay missionary, that the types of service, very social justice oriented, it's not just there that it's easy to identify with that, because work really does it, and that's what Swami also talks about, is be careful with applying a worldly attitude to what you do. And when that happens, what I notice for myself, the project takes on a certain weight, right? And then suddenly it really matters in a personal way, the outcome of that project. And it's really not a good way to serve. I won't receive the best out of it, and I won't give the best when I'm feeling that way. It happens, though. I stumble. Right? And then, I notice, okay, what's going on? So pause. Where's the joy? Right? Could I reach out to someone else for some help to help realign? Maybe I need to get some inspiration. Go to a class, watch a talk, do something to, there it is. Okay, there's the energy. Head back in again. So just in my mind, there were so many different stories coming to mind. One I'll share is that with a lay missionary who, we were in Chicago, that's where it was based, and we also had sites in Guatemala, so it was international. Really beautiful organization, Claretians, just to mention. They followed St. Anthony Claret of Spain, and they were inspired by the love of Christ. And so just beautiful group. So this one volunteer, lay missionary, she called me and said, I think it's not working. I think I need to go home. And, okay, so it happens, right? So I said, okay, well, I'll come over and we can talk. And I went with my associate director. We went to meet with her and have tea and talk about it. And she laid out, she was doing very humble work. She was serving in the food pantry, stocking it, receiving things, putting them in, and then once a week, or I think it was a couple times a week, she'd open it and serve. It was the primary thing she was doing. I don't know if she was doing anything else. So there was a solitary component to it, except for when you're with people, right? And she had been a documentary filmmaker, and she was quite accomplished in her life. She had an impressive, what they call now, I guess, a CV. She had an impressive CV. And she was used to doing great work, I have to say. She was doing very good work in Florida, and it was calling her, right? It was calling her, and she was feeling like, what am I doing? Here I am in this obscurity, like, what am I doing here? Like, I have all these talents. I have all these abilities. The talents and abilities I have, it doesn't take a lot to stock cans. It just doesn't take much to receive things and put them in. So I was listening to her, and it's not easy. We have to be honest about our service, our seva. So I'm saying that because it's been my experience that, the teaching is to be selfless about it and to serve with joy, right, and not be concerned. And we're human beings too. So it's not easy. And so anyway, she had a great case, is what I want to say. And she was going, she was really clear that she would be leaving and going and doing good work, very good work. Wow, it's undeniable, right? And she just wasn't challenged. She thought she'd be more challenged. She wasn't challenged. I feel like it was a divine message moment of inspiration where it occurred to me that perhaps she is being challenged more than she anticipated, much bigger way than she thought. Maybe it's requiring everything she has to do this and find new talents, new abilities. So I offered that to her. We later laughed about it. It was like deer in headlights. What? Right? She had just laid out the best case for leaving. It was so fun with my associate later. She said, I couldn't believe that. I said, neither could I, right? Swami has said, he's had the thought of, wish I'd thought of that, right? It wasn't my thought. It just came through in that moment, and you don't know. But then I said to her, it's very difficult to serve in an obscure way, where really, who does know? Who does know, right? I mean, you've been written up. I imagine you'll go back and do this work, and it's very good work. It's undeniable. So I don't know. I can't say this is more important. I can't say that. What I can say is there's an opportunity to deepen your spiritual life, and I don't know if this is the right way. I can't know that. It's yours. It's yours to be prayerful about, to listen, to ask that question. Is God inviting you to grow? And it's been my experience that seva is an invitation to grow. Absolutely, I experience that all the time. So, as it turned out for her, I give her so much credit for this. She didn't, I said, don't answer now. It's yours. I can't answer that for you. But you just discern, you pray about it, you let me know. And she was irritated. I could feel it. And, boy, I really felt like I had empathy. So anyway, she just decided to stay. And it was an amazing, difficult choice. It was a difficult choice. And she did grow. She did. And as I said, we laughed about it at the end of the year. And she said, I was so mad at you. I said, yeah, I sensed that you were. But here's the reality. I could only say that because I practice it. Right? And this is something that I feel is so important. And I see in Ananda, and I've seen it in other organizations. I've had the privilege, spiritual organizations, to be part of, where the leaders themselves are walking the walk. So they're encountering their own challenges. It's not automatic. My dear friend just sharing with me the other day, I stumbled, right? You'd think you're beyond it. You think you wouldn't. You think it'd be easy. It wasn't easy for me yesterday. Gosh, Seva, the whole thing is Seva, intercommunion. I just had the experience last week. Wouldn't it be great? I couldn't answer it here. I had to answer it here and take a risk. Maybe I get it wrong. Yeah, maybe I get it wrong. So I was talking with another friend about that, and she was asking me, how do you know karma and dharma? Because I don't want any more karma. We said a beautiful purification ceremony we practiced, like tossing the karma into the fire. I want to be done with it. So I only want to choose dharma and dharmic things. I agree. Like, yeah, that's the intention. That's what we want. And she was just saying, how do you know? And then she shared with me an experience she went through, and she felt ultimately like it was, but wasn't sure. And what I was saying in my experience is that we do our best. We invite God in, right? We ask for guidance. We seek counsel with wise friends. We have these practices that strengthen us and help us get better at discerning. And then there's a moment of surrender. I don't know. But what I've found is that God is forgiving. That the love of God is benevolent. Right? And there's a beautiful prayer I was reminded of, and I think it's Meister Eckhart, I'm not sure, where he said, I don't know if I'm following your will, God, but I believe that my desire to follow your will is pleasing to you. Another way I think I've heard it said is, I don't know if I'm pleasing you, but I believe that the desire to please you is pleasing to you. And I heard Swami talk about this, one of his treasure talks. This is Treasures Along the Path, if you haven't heard of that. Beautiful resource. And he was talking about this, right? And decisions. It was really how you make decisions, how do we do it? And he said, we think that ultimately there are many ways that we can learn, and lots of decisions aren't as important as we think they are. They aren't as critical that, if I make this choice or I make that choice, it's going to be the game, right? It's going to be my spiritual life. And most aren't like that. So you do your best, and you recognize that your desire to please God is pleasing to God. That master appreciates being invited. Okay, just ask. So that's the other thing my friend and I were talking about is, she said, I did this and this and this, and then I said, Master, or divine energy, I can't forget her exact words, help. I said, there you go. That's the one, because I don't know. We don't know. Right? And it isn't until later. So I didn't have it with me. I tend to do so much studying and everything before. It's good for me. But then another good thing is to not bring it. Let it go. It's fine. So, but I pulled out, Swamiji wrote a beautiful long list of how to evaluate your spiritual progress. And it's important to say, because he said so at the beginning, he doesn't recommend that we evaluate our spiritual progress, because it's hard to do. And it's easy to be too hard on ourselves and just hold self-realization, whatever the bar is. I mean, that is our bar. But to just feel that we're less than we really are. We're divine souls, right? And again, stumbling, it's okay. It's all right. So anyway, long, beautiful list. You can probably Google that and find it. And a lot of what's in there is the word desire to or willingness to. It isn't that you've achieved it. Like, here's all these points. There's many of them, I think 28, maybe more. But a lot of them are you have a desire to be serviceful. You have a desire to grow. You have a desire to know God. And that helps us point ourselves in the right direction and say, oh, okay, so do that, right? Point yourself in the right direction. And then he also said, I don't recommend you evaluate yourself. If you must, his first recommendation is do that in decades. So look at it in decades. You can evaluate after 10 years. Any changes? You see anything? And usually we can see in decades. Okay, if that's too long, a couple of years, right? And then, if that's hard, look at the list and see, are you willing to grow? Okay, maybe you feel like you're not growing, but you're willing to. You'd like to. Like, gosh, I don't know. I feel like I chose it and it was karma, not dharma. But I wanted dharma. Great. That's so good. So let's see, I think I'll maybe wrap up with a personal story, and that also is part of the theme that I've noticed with Seva and intercommunion. One of the things that I have the joy to do is lead the yoga teacher training programs. I co-lead them with Yudhishthira, and then we have other beautiful teachers who come in and help us. And we, at a certain point in the training, towards the end, you've just covered so much, and you're focusing on how to set up space, how to go out and teach, and ultimately how to create the perfect environment for Seva. And then, there's kind of a pause, and we say, and here's the truth. It may not happen like that. Like the lighting, you figured it out and it doesn't work, right? It's like there's all these things, and I think for myself, and it's another way the ego can be dissolved because of how much you can't control, right? So you have a great plan, right? Okay, here's a great plan. And I remember coming here one day to teach, and there was either a sign or I went into the bathroom and realized, bathroom's not working. Okay, so now what will we do? And it's that kind of practice of pausing and asking for grace and say, okay, now what? Great story of Swamiji, one of his famous stories of being in India, and the travel didn't work out where people were supposed to meet him. And he paused and said, Divine Mother, now what? And it's a beautiful story about what happened because he was willing to let go of his plan, the plan, and tune into a higher plan. So my personal story is this morning, and it's so interesting. Anyways, before I left, I had this thought, are my robes here? Are they here? They're supposed to be here. And so I looked in our closet. Yeah, they're not there. Okay. And Asha was helping me with something, so I might have brought it home, but didn't. But anyways, I got here, couldn't find the robe. I'm like, okay. James, that I was talking to him, and I knew I only had enough time to dash back home and find something. This is my robe. So I did find it, but not at home. It was here. Right, and so I couldn't find it at home. I got something else. I was driving back. On the way, certainly I could feel the anxious thought wanting to be there. Right, and so I started chanting Om Guru, Om Guru, because whatever the thought was, and these are our practices. Right, the thought wasn't that. It was some other thought. Oh dear thought. And I thought, let's not have that thought. That won't be helpful, right? So, and trusting it'll work itself out. There's a reason of some kind. I don't know what the reason is. But it's helpful to be in a flow. This is brahmacharya, the flow of Brahma. And it is a practice to say, I'm always being supported. Right? God is always with us, guiding us, and speaking through others, speaking through the teachings. So that when we encounter the stumble, whether it's a personal stumble or difficulty, we can pause and remember, we're not alone in this. We're not alone. And ask the question, am I being invited to grow? For sure, I was this morning, because it's not easy to say, yeah, well, that's a challenging one, I admit, right? So with God, I could say, okay, that's a challenging one, to stay centered with that when time is so tight. It's like, well, okay. James beautifully, so supportive, okay, I can help in this way, and it all worked itself out. But more important than the outer, which is so easy to get attached to, is the inner, right? The inner consciousness, and say, okay, right, there's things I can't control. I don't know how it's going to work out. But can I keep my consciousness here and ask God to help me keep it there? And then that can be very much this blend of service, outer serving, and inner communion. And I think that's the practice all the time. Whatever we're doing, whatever the situation, listen for and invite the flow of grace. Ask the question, how's the joy? How's the joy? How's it going? Any light? Any peace? Are you losing that? And then what might help you bring that back in? And that is the perfect, beautiful balance. It's not the same every day, it's been my experience. It's just different. But if I'm holding both as my, as the practice of the teachings, I'll be guided. right? I will have a sense, and that's part of it in the reading today, that Martha was being corrected because, as was spoken of last week, she had the wrong attitude. She was too focused on the activity. And these teachings today are saying it's not one or the other, right? Mary had the right attitude, so in that moment, that was the better choice, communion. But then how do we take that into our activity? And that's for all of us, our daily practice. Okay, great souls.
If you're seeking freedom in a revolution, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For once the guns stop blazing, you'll find it amazing how the world can drag on just as before. If you're seeking freedom in a marble mansion, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For even when it's sunny, you'll be counting money, keeping up that showcase, your face lined with care. But if you're seeking freedom on a throne of power, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For though men all obey you, what if they betray you? Tense you'll be and waiting for foes everywhere. But if you're seeking freedom, cast away desires. Why barter like a beggar? You've wealth everywhere. For never can you buy it. Grasp and you'll deny it. Freedom can't be hoarded. It's free as the air. And if you're seeking freedom, seek it on the mountains. God's sunlight on your shoulders, the wind in your hair. For there's no one can hold you, boss about or mold you. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere.
O Master, may thy joy fill our days. O Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways. The time has come for us to see that there's but one reality upon the earth and high above, the truth that all was made from love. A love that calls to us to fly above the hills, above the sky, above the storms, above the pain. A land where peace and laughter reign. O Master, may thy joy fill our days. O Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways. Guide all our hopes and all our dreams, past every glow that only seems, into the light, the inner sun, into the truth that we're all one. Help us to find in every hour, in every thought, in every flower, a joy that spans eternity, the truth that makes us ever free. Oh, Master, may thy joy fill our days. Oh, Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways. Oh, Master, may thy joy fill our days. Oh, Master, may thy wisdom guide our way.